Number 1. Kmart. I guess in order for the story to really be scary, you should probably try and put yourselves in the shoes of an 8-year-old boy. That is what I was at the time, and there were several things that were going on at the time that made it even scarier. The scariest being a made-for-TV movie about Adam Walsh had recently just come out. My parents thought it would be a good idea for my siblings and I to watch it, so that maybe we would definitely know not to talk to strangers, or definitely not to get into a stranger's car. For anyone who might not know or remember, Adam Walsh was a 6-year-old boy who was abducted from a shopping area, tortured, and then murdered. All they ever found of him was his decapitated head. Now, I guess, looking back on this, I have to say it was pretty weird that my parents wanted me to watch this, but they never had a problem still leaving me or my siblings alone in the department store by ourselves while they shopped. This was true even after the story and movie came out. So this happened in 1983. My mom, brother, and sister all went to the Kmart to go shopping. As normal, my mom would spend a lot of time going through fabrics and things like that, which an 8-year-old boy would, of course, find boring. So while my sister stayed with her, my brother, who was 10, and I went off to the toy department. Now, I have no memory exactly of how my brother and I got separated, but we eventually did. However, at the time that it happened, it really didn't bother me. I wasn't scared or anything at that point. However, when I was done looking at the toys that I wanted to look at, I decided to go and walk up and down the toy aisles, looking to see which one my brother was in. And I walked up and down each toy aisle, and I couldn't find him. I went back and forth a few times, beginning to think that I must have missed him, but I couldn't find him no matter how hard I looked for him. While we were allowed to be separate from our parents, the rules were that we were never to go anywhere outside the toy aisles, and it was quite clear that my brother was not anywhere in that area at all. My mind went back to the kidnapping movie and all the kidnapping talk from my parents, and I suddenly began to believe that my brother had been kidnapped. So I thought I needed to go and find my mom, even if that meant leaving the toy area. This Kmart was rather huge, and it was even bigger through the eyes of an 8-year-old. I went off to search for my mom, and possibly my brother. I first went to the fabric and crafts area, and I couldn't find them anywhere. So I began searching down every single row, every single aisle in the store, and still, there was no sign of any member of my family there at all. I began walking faster and faster, rechecking all of the aisles and not finding anyone at all, and that made me begin to panic. I had been worried about my brother being kidnapped, but now I was worried that maybe they thought they had lost me, and that they had left the store altogether. Remember, this is the sort of thing that an 8-year-old would have been thinking. Terrified and on the verge of tears, I did something that I would never have considered doing before. I walked out the front of the store and onto the sidewalk. I was hoping that maybe I would be able to find my mom or brother out there. Perhaps they thought that I left the store and were looking for me out there. However, I didn't see any sign of any of them out there at all. At one point, positively devastated, I sat on the curb in front of the Kmart and started crying. I wasn't right in front of the entrance, though. I was further down at the end, so there were not a lot of people walking by me. And that's when this little brown car pulled up to the curb. I'll never forget the guy who was driving the car. I probably would have been freaked out by his appearance, which was unkempt and with a smile that was missing many teeth, if I hadn't had a ton of relatives who looked that way as well. And he asked me what was wrong. I explained to him that I thought that possibly my family had left me alone at the Kmart, and I didn't know what to do. The man told me that he would give me a ride to my house. All I had to do was get into the back seat of the car. He'd take me home, and then everything would be okay. I paused for a moment because I remembered all the scary things that had happened in that movie and the things I heard from my parents and from school. But at the time, I was also more worried about getting home to my family, so I really didn't know what to do. But finally, my wanting to see my family again made me believe that the man was probably really trying to help me. So he popped open the back door of his car and I got in. He then started driving out of the parking lot. I told him to turn left in order to get to my house. He turned right, however, and told me that he knew a faster way to get there. By that point, I had already told him the name of the neighborhood that I lived in, so I just trusted that he knew what he was talking about. I'm not sure how long we were in the car driving, but there was never any point that anything outside looked familiar to me. But I tried not to worry. I kept thinking that the man was seriously trying to help me. And that's when I heard the police sirens. And when the sirens sounded off, the guy started driving faster. I thought that was weird because I knew my family always pulled to the side of the road when the sirens went off. But this guy wasn't doing that. I peeked up over the back window and saw several police cars a bit behind us. The man who, up until then, I really thought was trying to help me, yelled at me to get down. I always got scared when people yelled at me, so I did that immediately. And by that point, I was severely scared, so I started crying again. I remember him yelling at me a few times to quit crying, but I wasn't able to do that. I was so overwhelmed by fear that it was impossible. I don't really know what happened after that. I was down in the floor of the back seat, so I couldn't see. However, at one point the car made a screeching stop, and that just made me cry more. I heard the front door open, and I heard sounds of running, yelling, and a struggle. A police officer came and opened the back seat of the car. He helped me out of it, and told me he was going to walk me over to the police car. I was still scared and crying, but he told me I was not in trouble, and that I was safe. He was only putting me in the back of the police car to protect me. When I was sitting back there, I did look around. I noticed the man who had picked me up was being held on the ground by the other police officers. I watched as he struggled, but they were able to cuff him and get him into the back of another car. It was all very surreal to me as an 8-year-old boy. The police took me to the station, where I was reunited with my mom's sister and brother. Apparently my brother had wandered off because a few of his friends were at the K Mart, and when he came back to find me, I was gone. He had gone to my mom, and they must have paged me several times over the intercom, but I never paid attention to the intercom. But when I was outside, a couple old ladies saw me crying as I got into the back seat of that car. They thought something was suspicious and quickly wrote down the license plate and car description and ran into the Kmart. They described what they saw, and my mom was right there with management when they described it, and they knew it was me. I guess the police can work pretty fast when they need to. I'm thankful that they can. There are still times today that I replay it in my head and wonder what might have happened to me if those old ladies hadn't been concerned. I made a really bad mistake that could have cost me the rest of my life. Number 2. Sixth Championship. This happened back in 1998, when the Chicago Bulls won their very last championship. I was hanging out with some friends in Waukegan, Illinois. Now, we weren't really basketball fans or fans of sports in any way. But hey, it was something that was going on in the Chicago area, and at the time, it was a really big deal. My friends lived on the top floor of a 5-floor apartment building. It wasn't a security building. The entrances were all from the outside of the building. The stairs were outside, and there was a long platform or balcony on each floor. So it wasn't unusual to see people walking back and forth in front of your apartment building every day. This is sort of important for what happens later in the story. So we were watching the last game, which, if I remember correctly, was taking place in Utah rather than at home. It was a close game, and we weren't sure if the Bulls were going to be able to pull it off or not. Now, one thing I definitely remember about the game was that it was very competitive. The Jazz kept taking the lead in the game. The Bulls would often tie it up, but weren't taking the lead. With Jordan missing shots over and over again, it really looked like it was going to be a Utah win, with the series going to a Game 7. It was a very tense game, which was funny because we weren't really basketball fans. Chicago took the lead with like 5 seconds left. That shot was one of the most famous shots in the history of basketball, and we were all on the edge of our seats. When the Jazz missed their last shot, and the Bulls won, we all jumped up in the air cheering, and then we heard the gunshots going off. One moment we had been elated, and the very next moment absolutely terrified. There were 6 of us in the living room. We immediately fell down on the floor on our bellies. Then we heard more gunshots going off. I can't even recall how many of them there were, but there were quite a few. This part of my memory is a little weird, because we didn't hear the bullets hit the front window of the apartment. However, the TV screen shattered, and then right after that, a framed picture on the wall also shattered to pieces. We didn't know what to do other than keep laying on the floor. We were terrified that if we stood up, we would be hit with an errant bullet. There were still gunshots going off here and there, but we weren't sure how many of them were close to us or not. All we could do was lay down and keep waiting. Eventually, we didn't hear any more gunshots, but we were still too scared to get up. My friend Jack suggested that we crawl down the hallway and get into the bedroom where it might be safe. It didn't have a big window in it, and there was no back balcony for people to walk on. So we did that. Once in the bedroom, which also had a television, we were able to feel safe. It wasn't long, though, before the Waukegan police showed up, and then it was them looking around and asking a lot of questions. The guy who lived next door to Jack got arrested for firing the shots, and I just kept waiting for the police to let me go. As soon as they did, I got into my car, and I got the hell out of there. I lived in a town called Grace Lake. It has always had a very low crime rate, and I did feel safe when I got home there. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that Waukegan is an unsafe place, though. I never spent very much time there, so I really don't know. But give me boring old Grace Lake any day. Number 3. Graveyard. I once had a really big fight with my then fiancé. It was pretty nasty, and when things got bad, I tend to try and get away. Sometimes he would follow me when I stormed out, and sometimes he would not. But this time, I really wanted to just be by myself. So I stormed off to the one place I knew he would never follow me. There was a graveyard in our neighborhood. It had asphalt paths running through it. There were also no lights in the graveyard, and not only did my partner absolutely hate graveyards, he was petrified of the dark. So I knew that I could go in there, walk around and be on my own with no problem. It was very, very dark. The sky was overcast as well, so there was no way the eyes could get totally adjusted to the dark. There were a few times where I almost accidentally walked off the path, but I was always able to catch myself. I felt very lucky that my fiancé had not followed me into the graveyard. It gave me time to think about the argument, and I knew that it gave him time too. And after a while, after walking and turning over and over again throughout the graveyard, I lost track of time, and track of where I was too. Well, don't get me wrong though. It was a huge graveyard, but I wasn't going to get lost in it. After a while, I had calmed down a bit, and I wanted to get on my way home. I figured that my fiancé had probably calmed down too, and maybe we could have a decent talk when I got home. And that is when I heard it. I heard what sounded like a laugh up ahead of me. I stopped and worried for a moment, but then I figured it had to be my imagination or something like that. so I kept walking in the direction that I had been going, and I didn't hear the noise again. However, while I was walking, I noticed something moving up ahead of me. I couldn't make out what it was, but I began squinting my eyes to try and see it more clearly, and when I did, I saw that there was someone leaning up against a gravestone. Well, he was sitting and leaning up against it. The guy began to get up. I wasn't worried about it because I assumed it was just a homeless man that was sleeping in the graveyard. He was having trouble getting up, I could tell, and I took a step forward toward him because I thought I would help him get up. However, he laughed a little bit, and I recognized the laugh as he got up. Once the man was up on his feet, I could tell that he was having trouble standing up straight. He was hunched over and needed the gravestone to keep from falling over. I just stood there and watched because, at the moment, I really didn't want to try and help him up. The guy lurched towards me, and he started laughing again. He absolutely did not look very solid, and I thought if I just pushed him, he would probably fall to the ground as a bag of bones or something like that. But there was something about that laughing that was very creepy. He was wheezing a bit while laughing, and it was weird. While being somewhat scared and bemused, I then saw something quite clearly. The man took out a switchblade, and that was more than enough for the situation to stop being amusing in any way and to just be scary. So I just turned and ran off. I had no worries about the guy being able to catch up with me. I didn't think that he could stand a chance. But what worried me after that was just getting out of the graveyard and back into the normal neighborhood. That did take a while, and I did stumble a few times getting out. Now, I don't think the man was anything other than a homeless man who probably wanted to nick my wallet or something, but I wish I could better describe his movements to you, because that, combined with that wheezing laugh, were what really made the situation scary. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I got back to my house okay, and my fiancé and I made up. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button and bell below, or click the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment, and share this video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.